We're joined now via Zoom by Advocate Romeo Nthambeleni, who is a legal expert. A very good afternoon to you, Advocate. It's a pleasure to see you once again here on SABC News, sir.
Good afternoon, Flo, and to the viewers as well.
Let's talk about your views, or rather observations of this past week, of the interviews that we were able to see being aired. It was felt by some, and I'm talking about opinions I've seen, whether it's on social media, but it was felt that some were treated with kid gloves, and that some were grilled through this process. Is that the sense that you got? And if it is the sense that you got, do you think that in some instances it might have been justified? I mean, let's be honest. Some of the justices who were there, the judges who were there, are people who we've known very well. We've seen in newspapers more than others. I wonder what your view has been this week.
Yeah, thank you very much, Flo, for that question. I think with everything that you have said, there must be consistency in terms of the process and the consistency of asking questions to candidates. And as you have correctly pointed it out, it started low tempo and then going higher. And there were candidates that were asked less questions, and there are other candidates that were asked more questions and even more difficult questions. And you could see from the tone of the interview that it was changing depending on who is being interviewed. So yeah. I think in relation to that, there must be a real look at how the interviews are handled, especially for this position of a Chief Justice.
And then let's talk about whether or not the president will take into account the recommendations of the panel, the JSC. I mean, I was talking to our reporter now, and she said, the president has sole power, sole right, or has a final word really when it comes to deciding. And the example I said was, if the JSC recommends candidate A, he could still go with candidate C. Talk to us through this process and what you understand of it.
Yeah, Flo, the only challenge that we have now is that in this process, the current president has thrown the spanner in the works in terms of opening up the interviews and the nominations, and we find ourselves with 4 solid candidates that went through the interview processes from the 1st of February to the 4th of February. And it is true that constitutionally speaking, the prerogative lies with the president to make a final choice of who is going to be recommended. So unfortunately, the public is not au fait in terms of how the processes of the commission itself, in terms of the recommendation, whether they're going to recommend 2 names or 3 names for the president to actually choose. Because what strikes me is that what if they recommend 2 names of the persons that the president feels that they are not supposed to be appointed? What is actually going to happen in relation to that? Because when it's done, the decision has to be made ultimately by the president.
Yeah, and then what should the president be looking for when it comes to a suitable person for this particular position? I would assume that all 4 candidates have passed the test. I mean, of what a judge should be, whether it's being fit and proper and so forth. So I would assume that equally they have passed that sort of test, the stringent test that you would have to have passed in order for you to become a judge in the first place. So what extra thing then should these candidates, or the one that's chosen, have above the rest? Because if you are the winning candidate, and I use winning loosely, but if you are the winning candidate, surely there's something else that you've had over and above the rest.
Yeah, no, you're correct. Flo, the distinctive feature of a Chief Justice of any country in the world, by the way, is leadership. Yeah. So that's why there were questions that were being asked about leadership and how that particular leader will be able to take the lead, the lead in taking the judiciary out of the stormy waters that is actually facing itself now in South Africa. So the important leadership for the judiciary is the leader that will stand out to be able to say that I'm going to be able to take the judiciary forward in the country, as the judiciary is a strong arm of the state. Hence, you can see how also the interviews were very much competitive in terms of their own nature, and each and every candidate have got different skills that they bring on the table. But what is most important and foremost is the leadership of the judiciary and going forward.
Is there a possibility that one of the candidates could complain? I mean, going back to my first question where I said, it seemed as though some were grilled more than others. If there is a candidate who says, listen, I think I was grilled a lot more than the others, and I was asked more personal questions, and I'd like to take this. I don't even know if the word to use here is to take the decision on review, but is there a possibility that one could then complain and say, listen, I felt that my interview process was not as fair as the rest, and therefore I want to complain? Or is it a case of, if the president has decided, he's decided, that's it?
Yeah. No, I think the judges, in their own nature, Flo, they're very conservative in terms of their own approach. But you might find that an interest organization can bring an application. It has happened before, where the process of interviews were challenged in court, and the court ruled that the interview processes must be rerun. So you might not find it from the candidate himself, but interest organizations that are interested, who have watched the interviews and how the questions were fielded on candidates, and they might feel that the process was unfair, in relation to candidate X. So if they do that, you might find that find favor, before the courts.
All right. Thanks very much for giving us your time, and I hope that we'll be able to catch up as soon as the announcement has been made and further discuss whoever is the candidate that wins it at the end of the day. Thanks very much to you, Advocate Romeo. We do appreciate your time, sir.